Hello and welcome to our lecture on the amendment process. This lecture covers some of the information that you can find on pages 14 through 17 in our text. The U.S. Constitution is one of the most difficult constitutions in the world to amend. Sanford Levinson of the University of Texas School of Law notes that of the 200 plus constitutions in the world, the U.S. Constitution is by far the most difficult to revise. And its processes are not democratic in nature. Proposing or ratifying an amendment to the U.S. Constitution will never be subject to the votes of citizens of the United States on a ballot or as part of a general vote among the people of the states. We can only elect those who have the power to amend the Constitution. This makes the United States Constitution decidedly undemocratic and inefficient and inflexible when it comes to the amendment process. However, it also makes it very stable. So while the U.S. Constitution is on one side as a very stable but not very adaptable document, as you can see on the screen, the process for amending the Constitution is laid out in Article 5. While the U.S. Constitution is on one side in terms of being very stable but not very adaptable, other constitutions have the opposite problem. Consider the Constitution of the state of Texas. In that state, almost everything has to be done by amendment to the Constitution because the people of that state restrict the power of the state. The people of the state of Texas have enjoyed 662 proposed amendments to the Texas Constitution. Of those, 483 have been approved by the electorate. Alabama is actually worse, and that of course is why Texas state motto is "Thank God for Alabama." Its constitution, the Alabama Constitution, has been amended over 800 times. In California, all they have to do to consider a constitutional amendment is get enough signatures to put the amendment on the ballot for the next election. And as we've seen in California, this makes it very difficult to govern. So as I said, the Constitution of the United States lays out a method for proposing and ratifying amendments in Article 5. And here I have a list for you of the two ways in which Article 5 specifies that amendment may be proposed. To propose an amendment, it must come from either Congress after a 2/3 vote in both houses, or from a specially called constitutional convention. We have never held another national constitutional convention after the one we held in 1787, where the Constitution itself was written. As you can see on the screen, we've never used this method of specially called constitutional conventions. Amendments usually, all of our amendments have come out of the National Congress, as you can see. All 33 proposed amendments have come after a 2/3 vote in both houses of Congress. Now, amendments usually specify how they will be ratified and how long the ratification process may take. For example, some amendments say that the amendment must be ratified within 7 years, otherwise it is dead. Okay, so once an amendment has been proposed, it can be ratified in one of two ways. So Article 5 creates two ways of proposing an amendment, and it creates two ways that those proposed amendments may be ratified after they've been proposed. They can be ratified either by a 3/4 vote of the state legislatures. So, in other words, an up or down vote in which 3/4 of the state legislatures vote to approve the amendment. Or they can be ratified by 3/4 of specially called state conventions. So if an amendment was proposed by Congress and specified that each state had to call a state ratifying convention, then 3/4 of those conventions would have to vote to ratify before the amendment could be added to the U.S. Constitution. As you can see on the screen, the first option vote to ratify by 3/4 of state legislatures has been used in all but one of the amendments that were ratified. And yes, we've only used specially called state ratifying conventions one time. Interestingly, if an amendment changes some part of the United States Constitution, we don't get rid of the original words. We add the words of the amendment to the Constitution, and the amendment supersedes the old part. However, in many states, for example, Texas, the old words are completely stricken out of the Constitution. They're not retained. But the United States Constitution is a little different. Now, you'll note that we've only used the specially called state ratifying convention option once, as I said, and that was to ratify the 21st Amendment. That amendment overturned the 18th Amendment, which, of course, as we all know, made it illegal to manufacture, sell, import, or distribute alcoholic beverages in the United States. Many of us here in the United States really appreciate the 21st Amendment. Now, the Supreme Court plays a role in the amendment process, sometimes a role it did not intend. So just to recap, Congress actually has considered, as the text notes, Congress has considered more than 10,000 proposed amendments. Of those 10,000, it has only voted to send 33 of them to the states for ratification. Of those 33, 6 failed to achieve ratification within the allotted time. Thus, we have 27 amendments to the United States Constitution. Now, 4 of those amendments, Amendment 11, 13, 14, 16, and 26, were proposed and ratified with the specific purpose of overturning Supreme Court decisions. For example, the 13th and 14th Amendment were designed to overturn the Dred Scott v. Sanford decision. The 16th Amendment was ratified to overturn the court's decision that the national government could not levy an income tax on its citizens, and many of us do not appreciate the 16th Amendment. Also, the court has decided that it plays a very limited role in determining whether a proposed amendment has been ratified. It views such matters as political questions, as you can see up on the screen. The court views questions about the ratification process as not fit for the court to decide. Finally, in other words, what they're saying is that the court views such matters as questions best left to the political process, and that they're not fitting for a court to decide. In that way, the court really restrains the use of its power and defers to the constitutional process. Okay, so you should also note, finally, that the court has used the 14th Amendment to create a national system of rights that limit state power. The 14th Amendment requires that states give all persons within their jurisdiction due process, equal protection of the laws, and respect the privileges and immunities of citizenship. Now, the 14th Amendment actually says that Congress shall have the power to put that amendment into effect and supervise the states. But the Supreme Court has the power to say what the Constitution means, and the 14th Amendment is part of the Constitution. So, the Supreme Court has played a central role in determining what words like due process and equal protection mean and how they apply to the states. And that is our lecture on the amendment process.